So it's been a couple of months since Game of Thrones ended. And at the time I tore the season a new one, I said it was awful. I made rant videos about all the episodes. I said they sucked. I talked about why it made no sense. And it's like, it just keeps coming up in my mind, like almost on a daily basis, just how much it sucked. And I've like hated it more and more as time has gone on. Like at the time, I just thought it was horrible. Like I just thought it was bad, but I was kind of in denial about how bad it was. I'm just like, oh, it was kind of a cheesy ending. It really sucked, but I don't know. I guess I've seen worse stuff. But it's like hard for me to think of something worse. And by that I mean like something worse that when I say something worse, I don't include stuff like the Hip Hop Witch or like Cold Souls or Tree of Life or like some crappy art movie. I mean, of like mainstream stuff that had a budget and had like a creative team behind it. It was made to appeal to more than like five people. So while like the Hip Hop Witch is definitely worse than this, no one cares about the Hip Hop Witch. But if like something that has a budget, the only thing I can think of that's as bad as this might be Q, might be Evangelion 3.0 for just how much it butchers all the characters involved and how much it's just like I'll get into it in a minute. I've talked about Q in the past. I'm not going to talk about it here. But like in terms of bad sequels, reboots, remakes, like I can't think of something worse than this. This is worse than Thor 2. This is worse than Iron Man 2. This is worse than Transformers 2. This is worse than the Star Wars reboot. This is worse than I haven't seen it, but Star Trek Discovery. It's as bad as how that looks. It's as bad as the original Fantastic Four movie. It this I don't know if it's as bad as Dragon Ball Evolution. Okay, it's not as bad as Dragon Ball Evolution. I take it back. But this was really bad. And it's kind of fascinating. It's kind of like a DC movie in a way. Is except DC movies are just you kind of assume that they're going to be shit whereas this show used to be really good. And even though it really kind of nosedived since season 5, you still had moments like when Jon Snow gets crowned King of the North, or like Elena Tyrell's death scene, that were legitimately really good, really well written, really well acted, and sometimes kind of made you tear up a bit. And you had this going into basically the end of the show. Like it had kind of started to suck a while back, but it was still fun. Like season 7 was horrible, don't get me wrong, but it was a lot of fun. It still like felt like the cast was kind of enjoying themselves. And this one, it felt like the studio was like rigged to explode, and if they didn't like make it through all the scenes, that some saw trap was going to come off. And it's taken me a while to figure it out why it was so bad. And I think I can sum it up in a sentence. It made no sense in a really lame way. Like there's lots of things that don't make sense. Like it could just be something completely crazy or over the top or just illogical or something like that. But oftentimes there's like it's just kind of it's interesting. Like End to Evangelion was in part made as a fuck you to the people who complained about the original mindfuck ending, but it's fascinating. It's visually very interesting. There's a lot of kind of themes in the background. It's a mess, but it's a fascinating mess. And like people complain about the end of the Berserk anime, where like Guts is in hell watching Griffith rape Casca and that kind of thing. But that was like legitimately disturbing and like bizarre and creepy. Like that was an interesting ending. Okay, was it a mess? Yes, it was a mess, but it was something. It wasn't like lame. It wasn't. It didn't make you feel empty inside. It didn't make you feel like you were dead, I guess. And that's kind of it. Like there's lots of things that have bad endings, but I have been going through my mind for the last couple months trying to think of a worse ending, like how it could have been made worse. And like, here's just a couple ideas, like when I attempted to make it worse. Okay, let's say the whole thing was a fake out and the Night's King won. They lose the Battle of Winterfell, the world gets destroyed by ice zombies. That would have been a much better ending, because that would have been interesting. People would have been talking about that for years as like the biggest bait and switch ever. It wouldn't be completely illogical. And while it would be kind of a fuck you to the audience, it would have at least been something. So like, that's one thing I came up with. My preferred ending, if you were going to try and salvage the clusterfuck, is at the end when Bran becomes king, his eyes glow blue like a White Walker's, and then it cuts to Daenerys going insane and her eyes go blue, like that Bran has been possessed by the Night King or Bloodraven or whoever, and this whole thing was like some 40 chess, 500-year long plan to cure the common cold. That would have been like a cool ending if Bran was the ultimate villain. Like, it still would have been like, wouldn't have made a lot of, well, no, it actually would have made sense. It would have like actually been his character having like a purpose. So that would have been cool. Someone as a joke said they wanted to make like a comic that would be like Drogon dropping Daenerys' body into like a volcano with a bunch of red priests, and she comes back as a fire zombie. And like, that would be way better than what the ending was. Like, that would have been awesome. It would have been like cheesy, but that would have been better. Like, just going for a Hollywood ending where Jon marries Daenerys and they rule together, or Jon kills her and he becomes king, even though he doesn't want it because she's my queen. That would have been better. Like, Tyrion having like a 4D chess plan where like him and Sansa get back together and they take the throne at the end. That would have been better. Like, it's hard for me to think of something that would be worse than what they wound up doing. Like, Cersei winning would have been better. That would have been an interesting inversion. But like, their inversion was just lame. Like they're like the last character anyone expected to become king became king. But it was the blandest, most worthless, lamest waste of screen time on the show. Like, I can't think of a worse character to have become king. I remember when the leaks came out, and like, these leaks are probably true, but can D&D really suck that much? And once again, it's like, it's inverting expectations. It's not what you'd expect, etc. But it's lame. There's no gotcha moment. There's nothing cool. There's no mind screw. It's not even really abrasive. It's just lame. I don't know how else to describe it. And that kind of like is all the decisions that they made in the last season. Like, you spent 8 seasons for Jaime's redemption arc, and then he just throws it away to like go be with Cersei and dies like a little bitch getting rained on by stone. Like, if you were gonna throw away like Jaime's redemption arc, I don't know, have him kill Dany or Jon or Tyrion or something. Have him actually like do something, go back to being like a full villain, or at least make him becoming a villain again like interesting. But they didn't do anything interesting with it. Clegane Bowl was just lame. Like, it wasn't interesting. It wasn't fun. It was so forced. Like, it didn't even make any sense. Like, Gregor just kills Qyburn for like no reason, and then they just have this really lame fight. And it just felt like they were ticking a box off. And once again, this is something been building to for like 8 seasons, and they just put it in like, okay, we know everything else sucks, but here's some fan service. And like, at the time, I described the last 2 episodes as it felt like they just had some leftover footage they had shot. And they had to figure out a use for it. So they just threw it in the last couple of episodes. Like, once again, the Arya horse thing. Like, what was that? Like, if it had been something dumb, I would have been okay with it. Like, Arya dying would have been better. Like, anything. They just put it in. It's not, like, even bad. It's just lame. It's just, like, it doesn't make any sense, but it's not something cool that doesn't make any sense. It's just shitty. Like, there's that. Like, all of episode 5 was just a massive fuck you. Oh, like the Scorpions? You know how we built it up that there's going to have this big fight? No, there's not going to be a big fight. Danny's going to win in like 5 minutes. Okay, well, Danny's going to become the main villain of the series now. And I'm just like, look, there's a lot of people who hate Danny and a lot of people who love Danny, and a lot of it's political. And I've been in that camp periodically. There's a lot of people who hate her because she's a feminist icon, and a lot of people who love her because she's a feminist icon. There's a lot of people who love her because she freed the slaves, and there's a lot of people who hate her because she's bringing a horde of Dothraki to Westeros who are probably going to rape and pillage most of the Seven Kingdoms. But I think even like if you were critical of Dany or you didn't like her, you have to admit her fall to the dark side was just like, it was just lame. It wasn't even funny. Like that screenshot of Emilia Clarke just staring blankly with like despair and rage as she burned King's Landing. It's like, why did that even happen? Like, and it's funny because the Dragon Demands has been talking about it, so there was no screen notes for a lot of this. They didn't tell the actors like even what their motivations were. So like D&D didn't even like, these weren't even conscious choices. They're just literally, I was right. They just threw a bunch of shit together. But it's like, you'd think even by accident, you'd have something that's so bad it's good, or like something that's unintentionally like passable. And that's like the people who just couldn't accept how bad the finale were like, oh yeah, Bran was Mr. Glass. It's like, no, that would have been good. That would have maybe even salvaged this shitty season. But no, they didn't put any thought into it. And maybe like that's the biggest insult. Like people complain about The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And those movies have a lot of problems with them. There's a lot of dumb things with them. But you can tell it was a labor of love for George Lucas. You can tell he did care. He thought he was making something good. He needs to be put on a leash, much like with Michael Bay. He's a very talented filmmaker. He needs somebody, though, to be like, no, down, George. No, you can't do that. But those movies are like fun. And a lot of like the bad stuff in them has become memes. It's become like stuff people still talk about to this day. What memes have come out of the last season of Game of Thrones? I can't really think of any. All the memes that have come out about it are like stuff that like meta stuff. Like Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet of Euron's forces. Or Kit Harington saying that the last season was disappointing. Or all the other actors coming out and saying it sucked. Like, that's made some memes. I can't really think of, like, any real memes from the show. Like, there aren't any. And, like, just some of the other, like, decisions they made, like, Arya becomes Christopher Columbus. Now, someone tried to explain this by saying in, like, one scene in Bravo, she said, I wonder what's west of Westeros. But, like, it's not an interesting end for her character. It's not her getting killed. It's not her becoming, like, a full serial killer psychopath and just doing everybody in. Like, those things all would have been better endings. Like, off the top of my head, here's some better endings. Arya reconciles with her sister, and she becomes Sansa's right-hand woman as she's queen in the north. That would have been a good ending for her character. she could have been part of the Kingsguard, or like Bran's shadow, or like his Master of Whisperers or something. Or she could have just married Gendry. That would have been a perfectly fine ending. It's kind of her. She's completed her hero's journey. She's a changed person. She's a lot more mature. And she's kind of finally kind of reconciled being a lady with her desire for adventure or something like that. I mean, that those all would have been much better things than her just taking off. Like there's the when the cold wind blows, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives, and they just forgot about that. And the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, and like Tyrion saying that Bran deserves to be king because who has a better story might be the cringiest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's kind of hard for me to think of anything cringier than that like whole last episode. It was an unmitigated disaster. And the more I think about it, the less sense it makes and the more horrible it was. And I don't know, it's hard for me to think of any way they could have made it worse and that they could have made it suck any more than they already did. So that's kind of my follow-up rant video.